The day I attended my own funeral, the rain wouldn't stop. It came down in sheets cold, relentless, the kind of rain that erases everything it touches. The marble steps of street Augustins shimmered like glass, and the black umbrellas bloomed like wounds. They said it was a tragedy. They said the widow had died quietly in her sleep. But the truth was simpler and far uglier. I wasn't dead. Not yet. From the back of the church, I watched as my husband's mistress, in her immaculate black dress and trembling pearl earrings, stood by the coffin that was supposed to hold me. Her name was Claire Donovan. The newspapers called her the grieving companion. I called her the intern I should have fired. She wept beautifully, one hand clutching a folded handkerchief, the other gripping my husband's lawyer like she needed him to stay upright. The same lawyer who'd forged the clause that erased me. Behind them, my husband's photograph stood on a wreath, sharp suit, sharper smile. Ethan Hale, CEO of Hale International. My husband, me mudir on paper. When the priest said my name, Victoria Ann Hale, I almost laughed. Because for the first time in years, someone said it without fear. And that's when I realized being dead had given me power I never had while I was alive. After the service, I waited in the rain, hidden beneath a hood. I watched as the mourners filed out politicians, shareholders, women with lips too red for grief. They whispered to each other as they passed. Such a shame. She was so quiet. Ethan's wife? Oh yes, the one who disappeared after the scandal. Disappeared. That's the word they used when a woman is erased neatly, when her name vanishes from the property deeds, her signature appears on papers she never saw, and her husband's mistress moves into her home wearing her perfume. The black car pulled up. Claire slid into the back seat, followed by the lawyer. He leaned close, his voice sharp enough to slice through the rain. It's all settled. The board's transferring control. Once the will is executed, you'll be co-chair by next quarter. Claire smiled faintly, glancing at the diamond bracelet on her wrist, one I recognized instantly. It had been mine. They drove away, leaving the church empty except for puddles and ghosts. I waited another moment before stepping forward. The rain softened. The bells tolled. And in that stillness, I did what every dead woman dreams of doing. I came back. That night, I broke into my own house. The key still worked. The air smelled of lilies and betrayal. Half-packed boxes lined the hallway. My clothes folded neatly, labeled for donation. I moved through the dark rooms like a shadow, retracing her past. In the study, his desk was open, papers strewn across the surface, contracts, stock transfers, his life dissected in ink. And there, buried beneath a stack of legal documents, was a folder marked The Widow's Clause. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. In the event of the legal death of Victoria Ann Hale, all assets, holdings, and trusts shall be transferred to the executor of the estate, Ethan Hale, or a party designated by him. At the bottom, my signature. Perfect. Flawless. Forged. I ran my finger along the ink, steady, clean, cold. A masterpiece of betrayal. I should have felt grief. I should have screamed. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled, slow, deliberate, because that was the moment I understood the rules had changed. He'd buried me on paper. He'd written me out of my own life. But what he forgot was this. When you kill a woman like me, you'd better make sure she stays dead. And Ethan Hale didn't. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in his leather chair, and stared out the window at the city burning with lights. Boston had always been beautiful at night, cold, efficient, untouchable. Just like me. Somewhere, my husband lay in a hospital bed, machines breathing for him. Somewhere, Claire was celebrating, believing the war was over. But they were wrong. This wasn't grief. It was preparation. I raised the glass, letting the red reflect against the window like blood under glass. To the widow's clause, I whispered. Let's renegotiate. Boston slept under glass that night, the skyline gleaming like 1,000 locked secrets. I hadn't slept in 48 hours. The kind of insomnia that comes not from fear, but from clarity. Ethan Hale had built an empire on contracts. He always said ink was stronger than blood. Now I understood what he meant. He hadn't killed me with poison or a gun. He'd killed me with a pen. By dawn, I was standing in front of the Hale and Donovan building, the firm that handled every one of my husband's private affairs. A wall of glass and steel, cold and perfect. The receptionist didn't recognize me. That was good. The dead shouldn't look familiar. I'm here for Mr. Donovan, I said. My voice was calm, precise, the kind that comes from years of being underestimated. She hesitated, scanning her monitor. Do you have an appointment? I smiled faintly. Tell him it's about the widow's clause. That got me in. Martin Donovan's office looked exactly like I remembered: leather chairs, expensive scotch, and the faint scent of arrogance. He looked older, but not wiser. His tie was too perfect. His pulse when he saw me was not. Victoria. His voice cracked just enough to please me. You're supposed to be dead? I finished for him. So I've heard. He stood abruptly, knocking over a pen. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, I replied. Yet here we are. I walked to his desk, my heels soft on the carpet, my eyes on the single red folder marked estate transfer. Hale. I assume this is the one you forged my name on, I said. He swallowed hard. Victoria, listen, it wasn't what you think. Then enlighten me. He hesitated. Ethan, he said you wanted this. That you were tired. That you didn't want the burden of the estate anymore. I leaned forward. Did I look tired when you saw me buried? Silence. I reached into my coat pocket and placed something on his desk, a small recorder. Every word you say from now on will either save you or bury you. Choose carefully. His jaw tightened. He poured himself a drink instead of answering. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, desperate. Victoria, you don't understand. Ethan was planning something bigger. The widow's clause, it wasn't just about inheritance. I said nothing. I wanted him to keep talking. He glanced toward the closed blinds, lowered his voice. It was a safeguard. If either of you died within the same fiscal year, all joint assets would transfer into a trust account. Untraceable. Offshore. And who controls that account? He hesitated. Claire Donovan. The name hung in the air like the smell of blood. I almost laughed. My husband's mistress. His lawyer's Nietzsche. And the beneficiary of our deaths. Of course, I said softly. A perfect triangle. You write the will, she signs the papers, he signs my death certificate. Efficient. Victoria. I raised a hand. Don't. You're talking to the ghost you created, remember? I turned toward the window. The morning light was cruel gold on glass, exposing everything. He thought he'd made me disappear. He forgot that women like me don't vanish. We pivot. I faced him again, voice calm, almost gentle. You're going to give me access to that trust. Every file, every password, every clause. If you don't, I'll leak the recordings of your private meetings with Claire, the ones where she called you her insurance policy. His eyes widened. You recorded? I smiled. No, but you just confirmed it exists. He went pale. Within minutes, he was typing. The printer hummed, spitting out pages of blackmail wrapped in legality. When he handed me the stack, his hand trembled. Victoria, what are you going to do? I gathered the papers, slid them neatly into my folder. What I was trained to do, I said. Read the fine print. Outside, the city was waking up: sirens, traffic, the hum of a world that believed in systems. Systems that men like Ethan and Martin built to protect themselves. But I knew better. Every system bleeds. You just have to know where to cut. As I stepped into the street, a car slowed near the curb. The window rolled down. Claire Donovan. Flawless, smug, radiant in her black sunglasses. She smiled. You look good for a dead woman. I smiled back, colder. You look nervous for a living one. Her jaw tightened. You don't scare me. You should read the will again, I said, leaning close enough for her to smell the truth. It's changing. And then I walked away into the sunlight, into the storm, into the next clause of my resurrection. Because revenge wasn't about rage. It was about control, and I had just taken back both. The next day, the city tasted like deceit, sharp, metallic, clean. I watched Boston wake up through the tinted windows of a car that wasn't mine. Ethan's car. His armor, his scent, his sin. The rain had stopped, but everything still glistened: the sidewalks, the glass towers, the people who believed they were safe. They weren't. By the time I reached the Hale corporate headquarters, the boardroom was already full. The men in dark suits rose when I entered. Old reflexes, the kind they never lost, even when they thought the woman who built their contracts was 6 feet under. Mrs. Hale, the chairman stammered. We were told you'd passed. Clearly, the reports were premature, I said, setting my folder on the table. A ripple of nervous laughter swept through the room, the sound of men trying to pretend they weren't terrified. They thought they were about to meet a ghost. What they didn't know was that I had come to haunt them legally. I'll be assuming Ethan's chair until further notice, I said, taking his seat at the head of the table. My husband is incapacitated. The board will operate under the joint authority of his medical proxy, me, and his attorney of record. The words landed like gunfire. His attorney? One of them whispered. Mr. Donovan, I replied, without looking toward the door. Right on cue, Martin entered. Pale, wordless. The perfect accomplice turned hostage. I let the meeting begin. Let the chatter of panic fill the room while I sat perfectly still, a queen, surveying the wreckage of her own coronation. The company's finances were bleeding transfers, debts, offshore trusts, all of them leading to one name, Claire Donovan. When the meeting ended, I stayed behind, staring out at the skyline reflected in the glass wall. And there she was, striding across the lobby, heels clicking like applause that didn't belong to her. Claire Donovan, the woman who cried at my funeral, the woman who slept in my bed, the woman who thought she could inherit my silence. She smiled when she saw me, that slow, venomous smile reserved for enemies you think you've already buried. Victoria, she purred. Alive and, well, how dramatic. Dramatic, I echoed. Coming from the woman who hired photographers for a funeral. Her laugh was soft and poisonous. I didn't expect you to take your death so personally. I didn't expect you to take it so literally. She tilted her head, studying me. You could have stayed gone. You had the perfect ending, mystery, sympathy, an open checkbook. Why ruin it? Because the dead don't sign contracts, I said, and you've been signing mine. Her eyes flickered just slightly. You don't have proof. I stepped closer, my heels silent on the marble. I don't need proof. I have process. That was the first time I saw it, the small fracture in her mask. Fear, hidden behind arrogance. Meet me tomorrow, I said. My lawyer will arrange the details. She laughed again, but her voice had lost its edge. And why would I do that? Because, I said softly, you're about to lose everything you stole. And the only way to keep a piece of it is to play by my rules. The next morning, we met in the one place neither of us could lie, the notary's office at Hale and Donovan. Martin sat behind the desk, his hands trembling so badly he could barely stamp the papers. Claire arrived in black silk, smelling of power she didn't yet own. I came in gray Kiat, precise, unbreakable. Let's make this painless, I said, sliding the documents across the desk. She frowned. What is this? An agreement to consolidate Ethan's trust holdings, I said smoothly. It ensures your portion is protected in writing. Her suspicion melted under the weight of greed. My portion? I nodded. Ethan would have wanted it that way. She glanced at Martin. He didn't meet her eyes. Her pen touched the paper. You always were generous, Victoria. No, I said, watching her sign. I'm strategic. The moment the ink dried, I reached into my bag and handed her another paper, a single page, stamped and sealed. Congratulations, I said. You've just revoked your claim to the Hale Trust. Permanently. Her face drained of color. What? I tapped the signature. You just signed the nullification clause. You should really read what you're signing, Claire. She looked at Martin, fury blazing. You said this was... He couldn't answer. He was staring at me, horrified and fascinated all at once. This is illegal, Claire screamed. No, I said quietly. This is justice. Yours, mine, and every woman who ever signed something she didn't read because a man said it was fine. She lunged for the paper. I pulled it back. It's already filed, I said. The ink's dry. The law doesn't care about your feelings, only your consent. Her voice cracked. You can't do this. I smiled, not cruelly, just truthfully. I already did. When I left the office, the air outside was crisp, alive, electric. The kind of air that smells like thunder before the strike. Claire's scream echoed down the hallway behind me, shrill, desperate, useless. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Because the next phase of this war had already begun. She'd lost the money. Now she'd lose her reputation. And when that was gone, I'd come for the only thing she had left, her peace. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my old bedroom. The city lights shimmered across the glass like ghosts of my former life. The woman staring back wasn't a victim. She wasn't a widow. She wasn't even the wife of a man in a coma. She was the executor of her own resurrection. And her husband's empire was next on the list. The morning paper hit my doorstep like a warning. Hale Industries faces federal inquiry. Anonymous source reveals hidden accounts. Anonymous. That was me. I stood at the kitchen counter, coffee steaming, the headline bleeding through the thin gray print. It had taken exactly 48 hours for the first crack to show in Ethan's empire. He'd always believed signatures were untraceable if buried deep enough in shell corporations. He forgot the one flaw in his design: every signature was mine. When Ethan's lawyers forged my death certificate, they made a fatal mistake. They didn't erase my digital identity completely, they only buried it. And like all buried things, it only needed the right hands to dig it back up. Robert King, my old forensic accountant, the one Ethan had fired for insubordination, still owed me a favor. Within hours, he unearthed every transaction signed V. Hale in the past year. Bribes, kickbacks, fake consulting firms, all under my name. They'd built their empire on the ghost of a woman they thought couldn't speak. Now, that ghost was speaking loud enough for the feds to hear. By noon, the house was crawling with reporters. By evening, Hale's stock had dropped 12 points. And somewhere in the hospital, my husband's heart monitor must have beeped a little faster, a comatose body reacting to the sound of power-shifting hands. I didn't pity him. He taught me how to win this way through loopholes, through silence, through precision. That night, I walked into his study for the first time since the funeral. The air still smelled like his cologne and betrayal cedar, smoke, something expensive that lingered too long. The walls were lined with framed contracts, awards, signed partnerships, a mausoleum of deals made in my name. Each one was a ghost of me, legal and binding. I sat at his desk, turned on his laptop, and entered the password. Hair initials and Hale forever. The irony almost made me laugh. Inside, the system opened like a confession booth. Hidden folders. Dummy corporations. Files labeled with initials that looked familiar: judges, senators, clients. I clicked through each one, the cold rhythm of truth unfolding before my eyes. They'd used me to buy silence, to move money, to hide crimes. Every document bore my digital signature, flawless, forged, and damning. That's when the door creaked behind me. Digging through old memories, Victoria? Claire. She stood in the doorway, pale and trembling, mascara smudged like war paint. Her voice shook, but her rage didn't. You think you've won? You've destroyed everything. Do you have any idea what you've started? Yes, I said. A correction. She stalked closer. You've made enemies you can't see. Ethan had deals with people who don't forgive, Victoria. You've signed their names, their payments. I looked up at her. Then let them come for me. You'll go to prison for this. I smiled, slow and deliberate. How can they arrest a dead woman? Her face twisted. You're insane. No, I said, I'm immune. She lunged toward the laptop. I closed it first. Her hand slammed against the desk. Her nails raked across the wood. You think this is justice, she spat. It's suicide. I rose, calm, unshaken. Justice always looks like suicide to people who profit from corruption. She stared at me, breathing hard. He'll wake up, you know. Ethan. And when he does, I stepped closer, close enough for her to smell the calm she no longer had. When he wakes up, Claire, I said softly, he'll find his empire gone, his name ruined, and his mistress indicted. That's a better punishment than any grave. Her lips trembled. You're not human. I leaned in. Neither was he. By the time she left, the storm had broken. Thunder rolled across the city, shaking the windows, rattling the bones of the house. I sat back down at Ethan's desk and stared at the folder labeled The Widow's Clause. There was still one document left unopened, the one marked with both our signatures. I hesitated only once before clicking. The page loaded slowly, a digital will with language Ethan must have written himself. In the event that both parties are declared deceased within 12 months of one another, all assets, shares, and holdings will be transferred to the trust of the surviving spouse for liquidation. But there was a handwritten note beneath it, one line, ink smudged, familiar. If she comes back, destroy her for real this time. For the first time since the funeral, my hands shook. He'd planned it all: the fake death, the forged trust, the insurance payout. Even in a coma, he was still trying to bury me. But this time, I had the shovel. I printed the document, placed it into a folder marked evidence, and whispered to the storm outside. You want me gone, Ethan? Then watch me disappear on my own terms. When I looked up, my reflection in the window didn't look like a widow anymore. It looked like a verdict waiting to be read. Boston's skyline was ablaze that morning, sharp, silver, and merciless. Rain fell in clean, vertical lines, washing yesterday's lies off the glass towers, but never touching the truth beneath. At exactly 6 a.m., I signed my own death certificate. The pen glided across the page like a confession. Name: Victoria Hale. Cause of death: cardiac failure. Filed by Dr. Simon Cray, an old ally who understood the currency of silence. By sunrise, the world believed I was gone again. But this time, it wasn't Ethan's illusion. It was mine. I stood at the edge of the harbor, the water black and mirror still. A manila envelope weighed down my coat pocket, a new identity, a fresh passport, and the transfer orders for every account tied to the widow's clause. According to the system, I had just died. According to the law, I had just inherited everything. That was the brilliance of Ethan's own clause. All assets, shares, and holdings will be transferred to the trust of the surviving spouse. He had built his empire on a loophole, never realizing that the same clause could cut both ways. He wanted a ghost he could control. Instead, he got a ghost who could own him. 3 days later, the world noticed. Headlines flooded every screen. Ethan Hale's widow, declared dead again. Hale Trust liquidation underway. Untraceable transfers leave federal agents stunned. The market trembled. Hala Industries collapsed 82% overnight. And somewhere in that sterile hospital room, the man I once called husband started to stir. Day 4. He woke. The nurse screamed first, the kind of scream that sounds like disbelief wrapped in fear. By the time I arrived, Ethan was sitting up, pale and shaking, machines blinking like dying stars around him. His voice was a rasp. Victoria. I stood in the doorway, dressed in black. No jewelry, no softness, no forgiveness. I heard you died, he whispered. I did, I said. Twice. He stared at me, confusion turning to rage. What have you done? I cleaned your mess, I said, and then I burned the house down. His hand reached for the IV pole as if to steady the world. You don't understand what you've triggered. Oh, I do, I replied. I understand perfectly. You built a clause to make me vanish. I used it to make you invisible instead. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You think you've won? They'll come for you, the investors, the partners, the men whose money built this empire. Let them, I said softly. They'll find an empty office, a dead CEO, and a trust owned by no one. You wanted me erased, Ethan. Congratulations. You're the one who's gone now. He tried to stand, but his body betrayed him, trembling, fragile, unrecognizable. For the first time, I saw the truth behind his power. It had never been strength. It had been control, and now he had none. Victoria, he said again, quieter this time, almost pleading. We can fix this. Together. We always did. I stepped closer, eyes cold. You don't fix rot, Ethan. You cut it out. He flinched, not from fear, but from recognition. He knew I meant it. When I left the hospital, reporters swarmed the entrance. Flashes, voices, the same chaos that once crowned him king. Mrs. Hale, is it true you've been declared legally deceased? Who controls the Hale Trust now? Did you fake your death for financial gain? I paused at the top of the steps, the rain starting again, thin, steady, surgical. I looked straight into the cameras and said, "Death is only permanent for the guilty." Then I walked away. 1 week later, the courthouse was packed, marble floors, oak benches, and 1,000 eyes waiting for blood. The State versus Hale Holdings hearing had become the city's spectacle. Ethan, pale but present, sat across from me in a wheelchair. Claire wasn't beside him. She was under federal custody, awaiting trial for fraud and perjury. Martin Donovan had disappeared entirely. And me? I was the woman. The law didn't know how to categorize anymore: widow, ghost, survivor, or architect of her own resurrection. The judge cleared his throat. Mrs. Hale, pardon me, Miss Whitmore. As the records currently reflect, we are here to determine ownership of the Hale assets in light of the recent irregularities. I stood. Your Honor, My husband's will contains a clause that he never expected to face scrutiny. The resurrection clause. It states that all holdings revert to the surviving spouse, verified by death certificates, which the court has, twice. Gasps rippled through the audience. Ethan's lawyer stammered, "This is absurd. She cannot inherit twice she's alive." I smiled faintly. "Then who died?" The judge adjusted his glasses, visibly unsettled. "Legally speaking, Mrs. Hale, you are deceased. You cannot hold or claim assets under your own name." "Exactly," I said, "which is why the trust is now beyond jurisdiction. The assets are frozen in a name that doesn't exist." Ethan slammed his palm on the table. "You destroyed us." "No," I said, voice low and calm. "I freed us from the corruption you built. The empire is gone, Ethan, but your crimes remain. And now, when they come looking, they'll find you, not me." He leaned forward, face pale with fury. "They'll take you down with me." I leaned in closer, eyes steady. "Ethan, I've been dead for weeks. How do you prosecute a corpse?" The gavel struck once sharp as thunder. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions, lawyers scrambled for relevance, and Ethan's face went gray with the realization that his entire kingdom had turned to dust beneath his signature. As for me, I picked up my coat, my briefcase, and walked straight out the door. Outside, the storm had finally stopped. The air was clean again. For the first time in years, I could breathe. That night, in a quiet apartment overlooking the harbor, I poured a glass of scotch, his favorite. I watched the city lights shimmer against the water, fractured and whole all at once. On the table lay one document, unsigned, untouched. My own will. I took the pen, wrote a single line at the bottom, and smiled. The dead have no masters. Then I sealed it, set it beside the burning candle, and whispered to the empty room. Justice doesn't live forever, but it always leaves a scar. And as the clock struck midnight, I finally felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Cold. Beautiful. Deserved. 6 months later, the city forgot my name. That was the plan. The papers moved on new scandals, new sinners. Hale Industries was dissolved, its assets seized, its founder confined to a rehabilitation clinic outside Boston. Claire's trial ended in silence, a plea deal, no cameras, no glory. And me? I had already vanished again. But this time, it wasn't running. It was choosing peace over applause. The apartment I lived in now overlooked the harbor from the opposite side, smaller, simpler, stripped of everything except clarity. No portrait. No contracts. Just light, water, and the faint hum of the city that once buried me twice. I still woke early. Old habits. The sound of paper against paper. The smell of ink. The discipline of order, but no more signatures. No more names. Only letters. Each envelope sealed in white, stamped with no return address, mailed to a different woman every month. Letter Hasson went to a housewife in Michigan whose husband froze her accounts before filing for divorce. Inside, legal templates, names of pro bono attorneys, and a postscript that read, "Silence is their weapon. Break it first." Letter #3 reached a widow in Dallas who'd been denied her insurance payout. It included the exact statute to cite and a handwritten line. Justice doesn't vanish, it waits for women brave enough to call its name. They never knew who sent them. They didn't have to. Because justice never needed a face, only a hand steady enough to guide it. Every few weeks, I would see headlines: "Single mother wins court battle. Corrupt executor disbarred after anonymous tip." The world called it coincidence. I called it atonement. One rainy evening, as I watched the harbor lights blur into the tide, my phone vibrated. An encrypted message flashed across the screen from Robert King. Message received. Secure channel. Another case. Woman in Chicago. Same pattern. Husband declared her dead on paper. "You want this one?" I smiled faintly. Chicago, where the first ghost had learned to haunt the law. "Tell her I'll handle it." "Name? Doesn't matter yet," I typed back. "They'll know me when they need to." I shut the phone off, leaned back, and let the silence fill the room. Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon, soft, distant, familiar. The same kind that had followed me my whole life, and the same kind that always came before justice arrived. I poured another glass of scotch, not a toast, just ritual. Then I whispered to the window, to the reflection of a woman who no longer needed to be seen. Ghosts don't die, Ethan. We evolve. The storm answered in light, a brief flash across the water, white and pure. And just like that, I was gone again. Into the quiet, into the law, into legend.